G'day everybody and welcome back to another exciting DNA Reviews as we look at what is the second episode of the old season 3 of The Mandalorian. Very exciting stuff. Huge changes from last week, but one thing that has not changed at all is Aaron. How you going, old son?
Good. How are you? Good to see everyone joining us here again today. We had a holiday here in Victoria. It was Labor Day, so of course I was in the shop all day by myself.
Oh, it's a tough life, mate. Still in there selling all these quality Mandalorian products, is that right?
Absolutely. We didn't sell any Mandalorian stuff today, but we did sell some Star Wars.
Oh, mate, you're always selling some Star Wars stuff, which is very, very groovy. Anyway, so we've got a bit of a big show tonight. We're actually discussing, as we all well know, the good old Mines of Mandalore. So one of the rare occasions where instead of an episode just saying that whatever, they've actually got a bit more of a few more words chucked in, which is particularly cool. And as always, for those who aren't aware of it, we will be discussing spoilers. So if you didn't watch the episode last week, which I find would be highly unlikely for most people, be sure to shut your ears if there are things that you do not want to know, because there's some very cool stuff going on in this particular episode. And I think a lot of people would argue and agree that it's certainly a vast improvement over part one, the opposite, or the apostate, or whatever it was called. So what are your quick thoughts here, Mr. Aaron?
I thought this was a much better episode, as you've said. I thought this episode was good because it was very, very derivative of a lot of popular culture, sci-fi, fantasy shows, right down to the title, the Mines of Mandalore, is very close to the Mines of Moria from Lord of the Rings.
Indeed it is, and we'll cover that off as we get further into it. So the first thing is, so as always with our discussions, we're here to sort of look at the episode and we look at the parts that really worked and the parts that we kind of question. So we're not here to sort of like give it the gush fest, but by the same token, we're not here to kick the crap out of it either. So we'll just sort of go through it and sort of like shot by shot and scene by scene effectively and work out what worked and what didn't. But one thing we did pick up on is that one thing you can't escape whenever you're in the galaxy far, far away is good old Tatooine. We're back there. We're back there again, Mr. Aaron. We can't get rid of this place.
It's funny, isn't it? Because last week I was kind of saying I'd rather be on Tatooine than this like well-manicured town that they're in now. But you go back there and go, well, there's a whole big galaxy, and they go back to Tatooine in every single series, a bit like a yo-yo, don't they?
Yeah, one day they'll do a series where they don't go to Tatooine at all. I suppose in Andor they kind of didn't. And, you're thinking, oh, my God, what am I missing? It's like missing an old friend from a party. So we end up in what effectively the boot to Eve is kicking off. So for harking back to the good old Phantom Menace. And, of course, we're seeing a bit of swindling going on with Pelimoto and a Rodian dude. And I did think at the time, I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this was Wald? Now, it's not. It hasn't been confirmed. So remember Wald from the Phantom Menace? Wouldn't it be funny if he grew up and that was him getting swindled by Pelimoto? So I don't know. Whenever you see a Rodian, they all look the same to me. So I thought that might be possible. What do you think?
It's the possibility. I was wondering, were the Jawas the same Jawas that pulled the scam in Obi-Wan, where they stole the parts and then sold it back to him, which was the same scam that they were running here?
It's possible. I mean, there's a lot of Jawas groups and tribes on Tatooine, and yeah, I mean, you can certainly draw some dots. What you need to do is kind of look at their sort of like their outfits and their eyes, and you go from the eyes, the color of the eyes, are they the same ones or not?
Is it the same brightness intensity? Is it a 20 volt or a 40 volt? What eye?
Tell you what, you're not wrong. So we get to the whole Pelimoto thing, and the funny thing I thought is that normally this would be classed as a bit of a silly sort of moment. You know, if you look in the background, the pit droids have got the big pole and they're swinging around. They're doing the Three Stooges sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
And she's pulling the swindle on the Rodian guy about, stealing the parts out of the ship and then putting them back in and whatever else. Normally, this would be classed as completely pointless, and it was pointless. But for whatever reason, I actually thought it was actually quite entertaining, and I didn't mind it. It kind of worked for me. So I don't know why, because normally I would think this is just a bit silly, but it seemed to be enjoyable. So how did you find it, dude?
Yeah, I thought it was loaded with Easter eggs. I thought the stuff they were playing with looked a lot like trash compactor junk. The one thing that I wondered about, didn't she say to him it's going to take you months to get all the parts? Surely if the Jawas have just stolen them, they'll be able to get them the next day. Isn't that a bit suspicious?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You are right. And clearly, and I thought it was just funny. She talks in Jawaese to them, even though they understand English perfectly. And I thought it was completely dumb, right? but it worked. And it was a bit of a long sequence because the guy leaves and the jailers come back out with the parts, put them back on the ship. For whatever reason, the Palimoto thing for this worked.
Yes.
Even though I like this one from DJ. I like this. Yeah, grown Tatooine. Yeah, it's like Alice Springs for Star Wars. Middle of nowhere, center of everything. Absolutely love it. And William, Tatooine, the Wonder Years for good old Wald. Yeah, I don't know. It was just one of those things you could pick out a whole lot of bits, and I've highlighted a couple of moments here that I think are worth pointing out. Apparently, someone said that the pit droid who does all the marshalling signals for when Din returns, they're actually what they do in real life. So he does the whole thing like that. When they lands across like that, and then he does this with it, which I think means turn the engine off. And I thought someone's picked up and said, "Well, that's kind of cool." So there you go.
Why doesn't Pelly have pit girls then? That's what I'd like to know.
Pit girls?
Yeah.
What?
From the Formula One, the grid girls.
They don't do grid girls anymore. Dude, they did that back in the 1980s. Grid girls. Oh my goodness.
There you go. I'm a
countries
retro
do,
guy.
but most of them
don't. A retro guy. The one thing I was going to ask: did you notice that? I don't know if this will be a story point down the point. She's lost a tooth.
Yes, I did pick on that. Normally, you don't notice it, but she smiled when she's looking at the ship, and she got a tooth missing right there. And I thought, clearly the dental work or the dentistries on Tatooine aren't much chop. So. Either that, or when the pit droids were swinging those big friggin' poles around, one of them smacked them in the face.
What actually happened? She had to do some repairs for a Harkonnen, so she had that whole poison one put in.
You're an idiot. That's a June reference for people out there. You're a friggin' idiot. I love this one from Adzi, who's actually recovering from gallbladder surgery or something. They keep going back to Tatooine because they have all the matte paintings. That would be kind of handy, eh? So. They just call it. We go back to Tatooine. They just get to the cover and they just start pulling out all the pictures. Like, here's a background of this. Here's a picture of that. What Mos Espa? Bang. What? Mos Eisley over there. Absolutely love it. Anyway, so we get through the silliness of it all, and it was a bit silly sequence, as we said. And then, of course, Din rolls up in his N1. Remember, this is meant to be a couple of years later. Okay, sort of make of that what you will. And the first thing we discover is that Grogu has matured now. He's starting to mature a bit. He's starting to make different noises, and he's starting to almost speak. And I'm sure one of the noises he makes is a cat noise because he purrs. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know who's doing the sound design, but they're getting noises from all over the place. Now, did you pick up on the symbolism of the fact that when he jumps out of the ship into Pelly's arms, that's a massive improvement over what happened in the Book of Boba Fett when he was with Luke Skywalker. And remember, he just could only hop little hops. So between then and now, which is, 2 years later, he's improved quite significantly. So it's one of those little things that most people, I don't think, would have picked up on. So even though he doesn't jump again throughout the entire episode or much. So you pick up on that?
Yeah, I did pick that up because she actually says, where did you learn to do that? And I thought straight away, in his training with Luke.
Very good. So the Grogu thing is an absolute classic. Now, as you know, I've always called him the cash cow, right? He's the chick ching. They needed him in the show because he brings in the money. And I saw first-hand evidence of that today when I was in IKEA, and there was a family there and a little girl wearing a Grogu T-shirt. And I go, yep, chick ching, money, money, money. There you go. So, she might not even watch the show. She just knows that Baby Yoda is damn cute, and I want a T-shirt of him. So, well,
guess what? Go. There's this shop in Blackburn called Aaron's Collectibles, and it has 2 full-size Lego Grogus, totally mint boxed, unopened. If anyone would like one, I'll mention this show and I'll give them. Let's make it 15%. No, 20% off. 20% off.
There we go. We're chucking them away.
Get your Lego Grogu. Don't listen to Dags, though. He's the one that says 80% off when I'm not in the shop.
Yeah, 85% off. Don't stinge my customers. Now, this is a good one. So they do mention Boba Fett briefly. So you got to remember, Boba Fett is actually still around and in charge of, I don't know if he's in charge of the whole planet or just Mos Espa or Mos Eisley or whatever. He's going to show up and demand his 2 episodes back. Well, he'd certainly be entitled to them, but it was interesting that they did mention him. So, and you would have thought Din would have paid him a visit at the time, but in the end, he just pops into Pelly's thing, grabs R5D4 and buggers off again. I go, oh, dude, you could at least pop in for a coffee. So,
anyway. Well, two things there. The first time I watched it, I thought maybe Boba Fett being in charge is improving things because they've actually the people walking around on Tatooine looked like they were a bit more affluent and a bit more. But then I realized it was Boone to Reeve, so they're probably just all dressed up for that. And what was the other thing I noticed with what you've just said with Boba Fett? Boba Fett and Din Djarin are both sort of not social people, so I can't imagine them dropping in on each other just for a catch up.
But I mean, what happened when Din went to Navarro? He caught up with Grief Karga, and it's like those guys weren't the best of buddies. And he's turned up on Tatooine. And he's thinking, well, I wonder how good old Boba's now doing now that we kicked out the Pike Syndicate and all the rest. You think I understand why they didn't do it. It'd just be a complete offshoot for the show. But by the same token, you thought, well, if you come this far, dude, want to stick your nose in and at least get a cup of tea. But there you go. Or what is it? Pog soup, which we'll discuss later on, which is actually quite funny. Rob has said that Pelly lost the tooth in the final episode of the Book of Boba Fett. I think unless you're joking, I don't remember that happening at all. Unless it was in the car chase, or the Twi'lek guy decided to smack away.
And 2 years to get it fixed is a long time to have that tooth out of place, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly right. You need to go to the dude who does all the body part changes for the mod squad. And so she goes down there and she says, I can just fix my tooth, and he just pulls out all these machinery that he can just look. I can't fix the tooth, but I can change your arm, I can change your legs, I can change your torso, but the tooth can stay the same.
Daniel's put up a comment there. Boba Fett is trying to make Tatooine great again.
Make it respectable. Yeah. All right, let us move on. Otherwise, we'll never get stuff done. Okay, so is R5D4 the same from A New Hope? And the answer is yes, he is. So, so it has been confirmed that this is R5D4 from A New Hope, and that he served in the rebellion. I thought that was an interesting sort of thing. So you think, okay, so there's one moment that we saw on the Lars homestead. What did he get up to?
There's comics and stuff like that, and I know they're not canon, but he was actually Skippy the Jedi droid as well in the comics, and all of that stuff where he blew the motivator in Star Wars was on purpose, so he could keep up.
Yeah, I did hear that.
So there has always been stories. I do wonder if they really care that much about it, though. I did think he is a big step down from an IG unit, though. I did not think that he would be able to be sold on him. And the other thing is, I guess he said they needed someone who's goes spelunking. So I think, did you mention to me that all the R2 units have jets so they can fly around, and that'd probably be much better than an IG-88 unit?
So a couple of things. Yeah, spelunking. That is the first time that word has ever been used in both the canon universe and the expanded universe. Spelunking. Seriously? It's like, what the hell's the deal with that? So it was kind of a bit cockeyed because, as we know, he's gone to the Jawas looking for a part for IG-11. The Jawas have said, no, we can't have it. Pelly's just said, hey, take this guy instead. And he said, yeah, right, I'll do that. And I go, well, that means the whole IG-11 thing was a complete waste of time from last week. So poor old Grief has torn his statue apart. He's sitting there with the fricks going, well, he's coming back at some point with this part. What was the point of all that? It's like that is disappointing writing, I would say.
I think I was saying to you on the weekend and you were rolling your eyes. I was really hoping the Jawas were going to say, we can't get the parts, but there's an IG unit that guards a junkyard and give them the directions, and they were going to make Shadows of the Empire canon with the level with IG-88 in the junkyard. But that's just making me happy because that was one of my favorite levels of the game.
I don't know. There's some really cockeyed elements here. And of course, I always thought that even if he had to have picked up IG-11, how's he going to fit him in the ship? The guy's way too big to fit in one. So I don't know. It seemed a bit bizarre. Whereas ironically, the N1 Starfighter can actually fit in a droid, and Pelly had to add in extra bits so he would go in. But anyway, it just seemed a bit bizarre. And it gets a bit cockeyed a bit further on too, which once we get to Mandalore, but we'll cross those bridges. And Daniel's saying, in A New Hope, from a certain point of view, the R5D4 blew his own motivator. I reckon that. I just shook my head when I saw that. But anyway, whatever. All right, so
must be a very lonely droid if he's blowing his own motivator.
He's lacking a bit of an incentive. Now, this is interesting. So we seem to get a lot of this when they're sailing around in the ship, and Din is having a conversation with Grogu. And I thought this was an interesting sequence, and there's a lot of talking in this particular episode, and a lot of it's really interesting as well. And of course, Din is discussing his homeworld of Mandalore, which he's never visited. I thought, isn't that interesting? Because that would, I guess, be the similar case with a lot of people in real life here who have origins from one country but have never been to that country. And I thought that was quite cool. So he's talking about, this is Mandalore, this is where we all come from, and da-da-da-da-da. But he's never been there. He's actually grown up on Concordia, which is a moon of Mandalore. So you would have thought at some point he would have jumped across. But I thought it was just an interesting sort of moment. So, yeah, there's a fair bit of it that goes on in this episode.
Probably, I would say, probably not so much now, but probably would have been a political thing where, because they were a different sect from the Mandalorians and totally different, it's like almost an exile thing rather than I just haven't gone there because it's close. It's like, I guess with what's happening in Europe at the moment, there are people that have moved out of Ukraine and moved out of Russia and they might not ever go back, so.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Mandalore had a history of being a bit of a nasty place for a period of time there. So I think DJ's on the right track here. So the whole IG-11 thing seemed to be a bit of a red herring. Will it come back? And is it one of those things they've sort of dangled a carrot, they've left it? So it's a bit almost like the Rancor stuff from Book of Boba Fett. Will it come back? And it might. But at the moment, I can't see how that works because ultimately the whole thing with IG-11 is just so he could get to Mandalore, check out the planet before he went in. But he's already there now, so
yeah.
And they're still missing the part. Sorry,
I hope the writers aren't just dropping names, and I hope they are doing stuff so it logically progresses. One of the things that we talked about last week then came into play this week, and this was the nature of the helmets. Do they seal off, and what happens? And we were talking about that because they kind of brought that up, and then that is resolved this episode of how they worked. So maybe the writers will bring the IG thing back later in the series.
Yeah, you never know. So it's certainly possible. But he's still got to get the part. He hasn't got that yet. Now, this is what I class as highlighting a fault from the apostate. Like last week, Din goes and visits Bo-Katan on Kalevala, right? And Mandalore is just up the road. So what he's done is he's flying to Kalevala, said had a chat to Bo, and then flown back to Navarro. And it's like, dude, Mandalore is just across the road. Why don't you just stick your nose in there and check it out? And it just seemed a bit cockeyed, and now of course he's going back there again. So it's like, talk about going around like around the block rock. And as you pointed out, and this is a very interesting sort of fault with the shows, that apparently Mandalore's been bombed to glass and it's all toxic and this and that. You think somebody would have sent down a probe to have a look and go, actually it is or it isn't, rather than just taking somebody's word for it. And that seems to be a missed part of the entire series, where everybody's just said, no, can't go there, but nobody's actually said, well, has anybody checked? So yeah.
So that just so everyone knows, Dags and I were speaking just before the episode, and I said to him, "Isn't Bo-Katan in the same system as Mandalore? Why is she? Oh, surprised! Haven't they sent anyone there to check out to see if it's toxic or not?" And that Dag said, "Yeah, that's a fault in the show. They haven't. Doesn't really make logical sense."
No, exactly right. So that brings us to actually going to Mandalore with the the R5D4 unit. And I found this really interesting. So he wants R5D4 to check the atmosphere, right? Now, of course, it's the Star Wars galaxy far, far away. Your ship could be landing on foreign planets all the time. You would think that as part of your ship, you would have a thing there to check the environment before you open up the cockpit capsule and then suddenly discover, oh, shit, there's actually all carbon monoxide here. I'm going to die straight away. So I thought this was kind of unusual. And, of course, you've got to ask yourself, could IG-11 have done this? Right, because it is a battle droid, effectively, a sort of like a hunting machine, whereas R5D4 isn't. So I don't know. I thought it was a bit unusual. He says to the droid, "Get out there and check the environment." And I thought, surely you can do that from inside the ship, dude. And as we discover later on, he can steal his helmet anyway and walk out. So
yeah, I've got a quote for you. This ground sure feels strange. Of course, they could check what the atmosphere was before they go outside because they did it in Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly right. And as I just said, Din can pressurize his helmet. So he actually didn't need R5D4 in that all along. And it you would have thought there'd be a handheld device that all ships carry for when they land on planets with unknown atmosphere. So look, it worked for the moment. I mean, R5 goes around the corner and he gets captured by whatever those things are. We get it. But it's just an interesting sort of moment of just dragging things out, and he's inside the ship with Grogu. Now, I understand Grogu can't potentially breathe the atmosphere and he's got to check on his behalf. But Din himself could easily have just walked out at any point. And you are right, the sealing of the helmet, we finally hear it. So it's all pressurized now. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
And now all the questions we asked last week on this show have been answered for us.
Yes, they are, which is a very groovy. All right. So once again, Din gets attacked by, I'm going to do this backwards here, by the galaxy far, far away version of the Morlocks from the time machine. I thought you and I would have said it straight away. It's like, oh my God. Yeah. They've stolen these straight out of that movie.
Yeah, I did think Morlock attack when they came out. I just thought this is one of the things. I think they must have been being derivative about this. It wasn't something that was a coincidence, surely.
Oh no, it would have been inspirational for sure.
Yeah,
and it's not a bad thing. It's not like they've gotten short of aliens and they said, I'll just steal them out of there. Hopefully nobody notices. for fans of the Time Machine who love that sort of stuff, the 1960 movie, that was a really cool moment. It's good, but they were just like the Morlocks. So what we need now is the Mandalorian version of the Eloy, and we'd have perfect synchronicity.
Yeah.
And of course, Din brings out the Darksaber, and once again, he can't use it. So, and there's been a lot of theories behind this because we see Bo-Katan uses it later on, and of course, Moff Gideon used it, and saying that he's struggling with it because he's not being a part of the weapon, if that makes sense. There's a whole long discussion that is occurring with a lot of people explaining why he can't use it properly while everybody else can. But it was interesting that even at this point, he still can't use it. And I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I did think when those Morlocks turned up that there's no competition here, yet they managed to put up a fight because he used the Darksaber. If he just relied on his skills with the suit and everything, I think it would have been a much faster fight for him.
Yes, exactly right. Daniel said they also look like the Morlocks. It's a homage. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's just an observation, not a criticism. So, and everybody thought Morlocks. So, very, very groovy. Where did Grogu go when he opened the cockpit? Yeah, I think he hit underneath. I think that's what happened. He could have gone back to his thing. I know you are right. I mean, really funny if Din opens the cockpit and suddenly Grogu, the atmosphere is poisoned. I thought that was kind of funny. And of course, the interesting thing is that Din's aren't worrying about all the atmosphere, and it's what he's not going to take his helmet off anyway. So what difference does it make? But as it is, we learned that what he'd been told was wrong. Right? He'd been told by everybody that the entire atmosphere was poisoned, and it wasn't. So already he's starting to question what he's been told from the armorer about Mandalore. So he knows something that nobody else does, and I thought this was a good moment.
Yeah, I thought this sequence was good, and I thought it looked good. I did think, well, I guess we'll talk about it later, but they kind of repeated it again, so it wasn't as exciting the second time round.
Indeed. Now, one thing this series or this episode had, and I was really struggling to work out which pictures to put in, the imagery was stunning. I mean, I don't know if they've CG'd this or built models of it, or if it's a combination of both, but there's a lot of shots. Even when we first got into the atmosphere of Mandalore and we got to see the entire vista, I thought, it had the ship with the trails behind it. I thought, wow, this is, and you've said this before, on the big screen, the cinema screen, some of this stuff would be spectacular to look at. And I think at the very least, got to applaud them for that. It was absolutely stunning.
One of the things I really like about The Mandalorian is the closing credits often give all the production artwork from various people who've done it for this series. And the production artwork on this episode was good enough to be one of those art portfolios, I think. I think it's Doug Chang who did this one. And there's lots of vistas of the blown up Mandalore and bomb to glass. And I was looking at them thinking, just by putting a little green spot here and there, it looks like it's, glass rather than just normal landscape. So I was really impressed with the whole production design on this episode.
Christy's right. Setting the vapor trails was a new thing. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was too, and it just looked fantastic. It looked so real. You'd believe it was they actually filmed real footage of a ship in the sky. Yeah, I thought the detail was excellent, and I can't fault him for that. So we get to go underground, and he's hunting through good old Sundari, which is particularly groovy. And it's the old classic booby trap moment, right? Where he picks up the helmet, which probably isn't Beskar, because, once upon a time, Beskar was probably known, really sort of aimed for the nobility and the royalty of Mandalore. And now, here's a question for you. Did you guess what was going to happen next? Because I certainly didn't.
No, I actually got a shock when it happened too, as in a little bit of a jump scare. So when I saw the helmet like you, I thought, that's not Beskar, that's Zingstor.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you're an idiot. When the thing jumps up and grabs him, right? Now, I just realized just then, because I thought we're having all these homages from different movies straight away. The first thing I just saw, Flash Gordon, the movie.
That's what I thought too when I saw it, when like he's in the swamp and rolls over and then that thing comes up.
Yeah, just catches him and brings him down. So I thought that was really interesting. Now, there are some pictures I've had to lighten because it was just so dark. But I thought it was a really good moment. And, of course, Din is in real danger now. He barely gets a scratch most of the time in all these shows. And, of course, we know he's not going to get killed off. But he was in real danger. And I thought, wow, this thing is actually quite frightening. And, of course, you don't exactly know what it is. And I thought it was interesting because when you see the alien later on and you've got the gigantic eye just there, I thought, is this like one of those things where you got this gigantic machine, but the thing running it is like a Babu Frick kind of dude. It's like really, really tiny in this big ass machine. And that's what I thought actually was going to be the case. And I think for the most part, I was pretty correct. Did you feel
Yeah.
that way?
Yeah, I did. I did think they were going to do that track. It reminded me in the movie Labyrinth. There's these little tiny trolls driving this big mech thing, and it kind of reminded me of the same thing. But I think we'll talk about it later. I thought something was going to happen that I thought would be really cool, but it didn't in the end. But when we get to that part of the episode, I'll bring it up then.
Yeah. And I think it is kind of good when you see a threat from something that you've never seen before and you don't know what's going to happen. With that in
Mm.
mind, I picked up on this, and I don't know if you did. And DJ said technically the season has been on another level. It has, and it really ramped up in
Yeah.
this episode, which was particularly good, and it was good to see because last week was a bit of a dodgy
Well,
start. But it's yeah.
we both said last week the episode didn't look great, not from just it looked a bit cheaper than the last two seasons, but this week it's come right back. And what you were saying before about it being scary, often you saw when the Mandalorian was caught, he was injected straight away in the neck, and later you see he gets injected again. You don't see stuff like that much in kids shows. That was pretty heavy for a kids show.
Yep, it's a very good point. Considering when we started at this episode, we're doing the Pelimoto stuff, the light and fluffy, it's all good fun. And all of a sudden we get to the serious stuff. It's a real juxtaposition between the two shows. Almost like you watch with your family, and once he takes off, you say to the kids, all right, go to bed, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
Very, very groovy. Now, Luke has joined us. Good old Luke. Plan to watch season 3 of Mando this weekend. You're a bit late. So you're going to get some spoilers, Luke. So if you don't want to be spoiled about what happened in this particular episode, you may have to tune out. But if you don't care, and continue watching. Okay, but otherwise, it's good to see you. All right, this is an interesting thing. I thought it was so. Din's been captured. The alien grabs his gun and chucks it away, but it chucks away the Darksaber as well. And you thought, does the alien, whatever it is, know that it's a weapon? I thought that was just one of those things.
Well, the thing I was wondering, and because this series is being derivative, are they going to play a Harry Potter thing where you don't realize the alien now is the rightful owner of the Darksaber because he defeated the Mandalorian, and then Grogu is going to be the rightful owner because he eventually defeated the alien, and no one's going to realize that, and they don't know why it isn't passing down to the right person if there is something mystical about it.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of discussions about like when Bo picks up the Darksaber later on, did she win it in combat because it got removed from Din from the alien? She's then taken it off the alien. I think he can draw all these bows.
When I mentioned,
no.
Yeah, when I mentioned Harry Potter, I mean with the Elder Wand that Dumbledore had, and they didn't realize it went to Malfoy kind of thing. It was kind of a trick. And I'm wondering if they played that here with this sort of secondary character we're never going to see again was the one that took it, and then it goes to someone else. So the lineage of where it's falling to is different from what the audience is expecting it to be.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I did like the fact that at least with the alien, it was threatening and it was frightening and it was different. And I think that kind of worked. Buried under the things of Mandalore, you can see it all dark. You don't really know what's going on. And it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. And I really sort of worked on that. Christy said the injection reminded her of the Dark Crystal. Oh, yeah, that's fair enough. Now, now you do get funny moments, even if it's not intentionally meant to be funny. We both commented on this on Saturday. Who thought Grogu could go that quick? He's like, da 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 da. And I reckon the puppeteers, they must have gone, how the hell are we going to do this? Because we're going to climb up a box and all this sort of stuff. But it was like, it really was Benny Hill stuff. We
both said the same thing. There was some really amazing puppeteering with Grogu in this episode, and then there was a couple of times where it looked like they took his legs out of screen and just rocked it side to side and ran across really fast, really dodgily. So I did laugh. I thought it was funny when that happened.
Yeah, it just goes to show he can put the turbochargers on it when he needs to, but it almost looked a bit humorous, didn't it, in a very, very serious moment. But anyway, he does that, and he runs along, and he gets up the box and all the rest of it. And you would have thought, he's obviously now getting strong in the Force. He just hit a couple of switches, and the whole thing would open up. That's what I thought was going to happen regarding Din, and of course that didn't happen. I thought, okay, cool. And as you said regarding the threat, like Din's going to get roasted. And the alien sticks the injection in, and blood's coming out. And I go, weak. This is a bit intense, isn't it? What's the deal with that?
Well, I think he's draining all his vital fluids a bit like a spider, because that's why all the Mandalorian crap is laying around. That's his old victims. It did have, to me, a touch of that Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls where the natives are laying in wait in the walls. Now, how often does he get someone come through there? And how long has he been waiting under the ground for someone to turn up? Like, it's very convenient that he might have been waiting there for weeks and weeks, or he could have just been there this morning. I guess he could have senses and knew that someone had just entered the city, but it is a bit convenient that, he walks in and he's been waiting under there for however long.
Yeah, well, it's the whole Shelob thing, isn't it, from Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
DJ's mentioned it's like he agrees with the kids' adventure show with some dark moments, and it is. And this episode is a perfect example of those, like completely two different episodes. And when you watch the second half, you can almost think, well, why was there? You can almost get rid of the first half, really. He's just picked up R5D4 along the way, but it sort of works for the nature of the story they're trying to tell. So I agree with you, Christy. Yeah, yakety sax as Grogu runs it. Absolutely loved it. Now, this is a funny moment, right? Now, in the ship, Din was with Grogu, and he said, okay, as a Mandalorian, you've got to learn how to navigate the stars. Okay, this is Kalevala, this is Mandalore, this is that, right? So Grogu, who knew that he could get in his little pod and hit the turbochargers and bolt his way out and go up the thing, and he jumps in the ship. And what I thought was funny, because R5D4 was in the back, he's effectively pointing to the wrong place. Kalevala's up here. Or is it down there? One of those two. I think it's up there, right? And it's like, he's pointing to the wrong spot. And I thought, what if R5D4 said, you want us to go there? Oh, okay, we're going to go. And he ends up somewhere completely different. So I did find it was kind of funny.
No. This one goes here. That one goes there, kind of thing. So,
dear. I mean, it worked, right? I mean, because I thought, hang on, we're going to have a bit of a communication issue here. And you would have thought, R5D4 as a astromech could probably interpret Grogu's grunts and meows and whatever.
Yeah.
But ultimately, he didn't really point to the right spot.
Well, the other thing I was going to bring up that one you might be able to help with, or one of our viewers, or it might be the Dark Crystal thinking about it. I am sure there's been another movie with a scene where someone's been walking through and the green eyes have been lighting up as they go through, and they don't attack until later. And I'm wondering, was it the bats from the Dark Crystal? It was a movie like that. And I thought this is another homage, but I knew it from somewhere, but I couldn't work out what it was from. Did you notice that or pick up on that?
No, I didn't. I just thought it was funny because Grogu's in there and he's not even remotely close to Kalevala. He's pointing all over the place. So an R5D4, you could just sit there going, R5D4 is a bit of a dumb shit, putting it simply. You imagine sitting there going, what? It's like telling a taxi driver, can you take me home? Where the hell's that? And I agree with that. Navigating is just basically uses iMaps and Siri. So I did find it funny. So yes, it was just a cute moment. But anyway, get the gist out. This is a classic, right? So the N1 buggers off back to Kalevala to pick up Bo. Now, Bo's still sitting on the throne. A lot of people are commenting on the fact you're sitting there by yourself in the throne room. Mate, how do you pass your time?
Well,
the ship lands. Huh?
So we did mention that last week. Does she just sit around? It answered the question. Yes, she does.
Clearly she does, right? And the ship lands and she's about to tell Din to bugger off. I don't want him. Nick off, son. Once she discovers that Din's in trouble, suddenly it's like, I'm going to go and help. I was like, well, that was a bit of an about face. It's almost like she'd be saying to Grogu, well, is he trapped on Mandalore? Well, that's just too bad, so sad. Cry me a river. And I thought that was just, I don't know what the motivation was there.
Did you get where this was the derivative from? This was a really funny one, I thought. What's that, Timmy? Mandalorian's trapped down the well. It was a very Lassie thing, wasn't it? Where Lassie goes back after the master's trapped somewhere to go and fetch help.
Oh, I mean, it's actually more of a Skippy thing, yeah.
Oh, Skippy as well.
Oh, the guy stuck down in the ravine. What? We got to get down there quickly before the waters rise. What? You think there's a storm coming in from the west? But it didn't make sense why Bo-Katan should just change her attitude like that from suddenly tell him to bugger off to suddenly I'm going to go and help. I don't know. I think the writers sometimes box themselves into a corner and they go, we kind of she can't just like send the ship on its way and Grogu goes, well, I'm stuffed. Yeah, it's unusual.
And you get that fantastic throwaway line. Oh, it wasn't toxic after all.
No, exactly right. Daniel said he liked the little dragon that chases Grogu back to the end. That was cool. And of course, it jumps on the top of the ship. And I like the fact that when the ship flew away, the dragon just flew off rather than say they're going to kill it, destroy it, whatever. And I thought that was quite cool. So, love it. And the whole thing with Grogu pushing the Morlock out of the cave entrance. Oh, you can see that one coming a mile away. It's not like the Morlock is going to walk out and he's got Grogu's legs sticking out of his mouth and he's munching on him.
Well, the other thing, again, this wouldn't have been planned at all, but it's just one of those things that's a coincidence. We talked last week. You talked out how the Mandalorian and The Last of Us was the same, where you've got Pedro Pascal. Well, last week's episode of The Last of Us had the tables returned where he was incapacitated and Ellie had to rescue him. And the same thing happened in this episode. So it's all matching up.
I hadn't thought of that. That's exactly right. Oh, you're right. The shows are mirroring each other. Oh, I didn't even think of that. You're absolutely correct. So, yeah, you are
Yeah.
right. He was out of whack in the last episode, and the girl had to look after him, just like Grogu is here. Very good. Oh, I wonder if that was coincidental. You do wonder what, because I think Last of Us came out first, and then
Yeah.
Mandalorian a couple of days later. Do you reckon the Mandalorians go, the writers, and they go, damn?
It would have been coincidental, but it's funny how these things line up sometimes.
Oh, geez, Louise, unbelievable. All right, so anyway, we're back. So Bo said, all right, I'm going to go and help him out, even though I don't like the guy and I don't want anything to do with him. For those who've never seen Sundari before, the before and after shots, because Sundari featured quite heavily in the Clone Wars. It was in a dome.
Yep.
It was a dome city, and you can see parts of the dome around the outside there, which I love this. I was looking at all these shots. I go, that is spectacular. Once again, I had to put this in because it just looks so good. And but yeah, so Sundari was under a dome for those who didn't know. We'll put two and two together, but oh, beautiful stuff. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I again, as we've said all through this episode, you could see where the budget was in this one. Maybe all the budget that wasn't used in last episode went into this one.
Maybe too. Now, this is interesting, right? So, for Bo Katan, this is the first time she's seen Sundari since she's been there. Remember, she was part of the royal house that looked after the place.
Yeah.
So, it would be an emotional moment. But did you pick up on the fact this is the first time we've seen Grogu with another Mando?
No, I didn't think about that. I guess we've seen him with haven't we seen him with other ones with Din Djarin, just not by himself?
No, it's always Grogu and Din together. They're a package deal. The dude and his dog.
Yep.
And, from the back, because it's all silhouette, you go, oh, it's Din and Grogu again, but it's not. It's Bo-Katan and Grogu. And I thought, it doesn't mean anything, but it was an interesting observation to go, well, someone different.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about with the production and the sets, we've all seen a lot of science fiction, and you go back a couple of years, and a lot of even to Next Generation and stuff like that, they have stock cave walls and stuff that they can use episode to episode. This one had background scenes that were not CGI, they were physical sets that were just used in one scene. And I thought that's an expensive episode. When they were walking through the glass tunnels, and also this part where they're going through the city, they were physical sets. And I'm like, that was on the screen for 30 seconds, and it cost a lot of money to make that one. It wasn't just a background cave that they've got out of storage. It was very episode specific. So I was impressed by this episode.
One of the things that you brought it out last week, and I didn't really think about it until this week, is that for the previous series and a lot of the other shows, they've used the volume, which is the digital background that they use. And it gives the impression, unless they're doing something different with this, that the volume isn't being used as much, or either that or it's integrating, that's a word, seamlessly with what we're seeing. Because it does really look like they're walking on real sets. And last week we saw that with Galaxy's Edge on Navarro. And if that's the case, it's working really, really well. And for that reason, I think you really do believe it's like a massive step up. So I'm not sure what they're doing from a production level, but it's working really well. So, yeah.
I know part of the reason they used the volume a lot was because of the lockdowns and because of the whole isolation, and they've gone back the other way. DJ says, was it 100% sure? Do you know, I'm not, but that's really good. If I can't tell 100% if it was or it wasn't, it's definitely doing its job. I thought it was because they had stuff in the background and they were walking around things, in the foreground, and they were walking around things and through things. But I did think about 3 times, oh, that's a real set, and that's just in this one scene, so they're doing pretty well.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, it just looks completely rigid-edge, even though it's not real. It just you can't tell where reality ends and the fake stuff starts.
Yeah.
There was a comment here. Grogu's been with the Armorer. You're probably right. I can't remember. It would have been the first season. But Din would have been with Grogu at the time, I think. But don't quote me on that. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I just thought it was interesting that we're spending all this time with Grogu and Bo-Katan rather than Grogu with Din. So there you go. Very good stuff. There was a good funny comment here, and I've just lost. Oh, geez, I can't see what I'm looking at. All right, so I'm going to just move on because I can't see what I'm looking for. Very, very cool. Good stuff.
Now,
all right,
if I had one criticism about this episode, it was like playing a level of a video game where we saw Din Djarin go through all the same things, and then Bo-Katan comes through, and it's same camera angles, even where the ship lands and everything. And I did think, maybe doing the same thing is fine, but maybe pick a different camera angle and things like that when she walks through the same places. Did you notice that?
Yeah, there has been a couple of comments where they seem to be sort of like retracing their own steps. Christy said, yeah, did you think that Din was the only Mandalorian? And of course, yeah, Grogu would know that that's not the case. But it was good that we got to spend a bit of time with her and him, and she got to explain a bit more of the background story and the background history. And of course, that's covered off in the Clone Wars. And of course, it's a shame that Bo-Katan didn't mention her sister, Satine, which was all featured in the Clone Wars stories, where Satine was the Duchess in charge of Mandalore, wanted to, like, she was a pacifist and all the rest of it, and she was really hooked into Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I was waiting for her to drop the name, and of course that didn't happen, but it was like hinted at, if you will. But
do you know what would have been fantastic if when they filmed Obi-Wan, they said to Ewan McGregor, come over in front of this blue screen and just film a conversation with Satine, and then in this series we have a flashback or something where you actually have Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan from the Clone Wars. That would be really cool.
Yeah. So for those who don't know the history of the whole Clone Wars thing with Satine, Bo-Katan's sister and Mandalore, it's really, really good stuff. It's really adult-based, if you will, instead of just being kid-friendly for the Clone Wars series, and it's really worth checking out. But there's a lot to absorb, and it's all the infighting, which is referenced in this episode, actually, between all the Mandalorian factions. You are right there, Mr. DJ. Yeah, the volume you can't do everything with it. But if they are using it in this series, and no doubt they probably are, they're using it very, very well, and it's very, very impressive. So good stuff. Now, one thing that Bo-Katan does show us that she can fight. She has her fight against the Morlocks and does really, really well at the same time, which is particularly cool. And I think even when she whips out the Darksaber, she's very proficient with it. And of course, that's actually important to see that, because we realized earlier that Din can't use it properly just yet. And
is that the first time in Star Wars we've seen a fight where someone has seen the aliens through glass underneath and shot up through them? I thought that was a good different way to have a fight in Star Wars.
It was good because it showed that Bo-Katan wasn't clearly just going to walk through places and have the Din thing and just get captured straight away. She's completely zoned in as to what's going on. Of course, she knows where she's going as well, knows what to look for. She knows what the aliens are called and who are they. They used to be like mutants who used to live outside the domes, because the domes is where all the poison atmosphere was, if I'm not mistaken. And she knew her stuff, and that was quite good. The only dumb thing that occurred is that when she ran up to Din, who's trapped in the thing, she's just looking at him. Are you okay? Are you all right? He's got things sticking out of him. It was like, what are you waiting for? Just pull the blood. He's sucking the blood out of him. Just pull it out, for crying out loud. That was dumb. And he says, behind you. I was like, oh, that was corny, I've got to say.
Yeah.
So that didn't work for me.
Oh, well, I'll forgive him on that one.
Now, earlier on, we're seeing all these homages to all these movies. So we saw the Morlocks from the Time Machine. We've seen the creature grabbing Din, which is a homage to Flash Gordon. And one that I saw straight away, and I go, mate, and I can't put the picture in because it's a bit on the gruesome side. When the head breaks off and runs away, it's the Thing. So if you've seen the 1982 version of the Thing, that's exactly what happens. The head separates from the body, the human head. The spider legs pop out, and it runs off.
Now here's the point. Like what I was saying earlier, where I wish something had happened at this point and they didn't go there. When the alien kept getting smaller and smaller, from the big suit to the General Grievous suit to the little head, I hoped his head was going to pop out and run away, and you just see Grogu's arm come down and his hand picks it up, and you just see him from behind and he sort of slurps, and that's the end of that eyeball alien.
Yeah. So it does sort of confirm that the eyeball alien, whatever, was actually quite small in this big ass machine. It's the whole thing of like, well, I'm really small, so the only way I can sort of be threatening is have a big machine, a big mech, as it were. And I thought, once the head separated, go, oh, there you go. And so the eye thing, once it's just been magnified, it's probably just like a Babu Frick kind of character. So it was cute, but anyway, so there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so good old Din's been rescued finally. It's all good. They're having lunch. All right, I like this. As you can see, it's a bad day for Din because Grogu had to rescue him, and Bo did as well. And of course, it's not over yet. And the thing that I loved, right? Bo said, "You've never eaten pog soup." So what do you reckon Din's going to say? No, I just collected them. And of course, pog soup. Is that the best name they could come up with?
I did wonder, because is that, she said all Mandalorians, is that previously from the Star Wars universe? Because I didn't pick up on that one.
No, I don't think so. I think that's a brand new thing. She said, young kids all grew up on it. It's like eating Nutrigrain or whatever. But I thought, Pog, is that the best name they could come up with? So
she could have said She could have said porg soup, and then everyone would know what we were talking about.
Yeah, Pog. And I really had to go back and check it. And sure enough, it was Pog. And I thought, bloody hell, that's the best they came up with. Anyway, not to worry.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of discussions that go on between Bo and Din, and it's really good stuff, right? Because they're looking at the same culture from two perspectives, and I thought that was kind of cool, right? So Din is a core believer in the creed, right? The children of the watch thing. You don't take the helmet off, all this sort of bizzo. And he is completely correct. And this was covered off from Bo last week, that the whole Mandalorian people, the culture, are completely disjointed and spread all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. And he has to believe in something. And he's believing in the creed of the children of the watch, which is the armorers crowd, right? Even if it's kind of cockeyed and extremist and zealot-like and whatever, he needs something. And it's possible you could look at it and go, well, this is like how some people dial into religion. They need to believe that something's looking after them, taking care of them. That's the reason why. Even if subconsciously they don't really swallow it, but they go, you know what? I need to know. I can't handle thinking there's nothing there. And I think that has something to do with it. But this is more of a tangible thing. So,
well, the thing I was thinking when I was watching this, I don't know if it's going to go this way, but it's very reminiscent for me of maybe the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones, where you've got Daenerys who wants to lead, and you've got like Jon Snow, who is more of the not the leader, but he's more charismatic, so people want to follow him. And I see this relationship here where she's the one that wants the Darksaber and wants to lead, and he's sort of being thrusted as sort of an unwilling head of the Mandalorians. And I can see it going either way, with either her riding out on the mythosaur or him riding out on the mythosaur. But it's going to be a very interesting, ramp up and end to the end of the series.
Dude, spoiler alert, we haven't got there yet. The guy's just having his porgs, it's Pog, P-O-G, not Porg, even though it would make sense to have Porg soup. But it's like in Dexter's Diner, you can have Jawa juice. How do you squeeze a Jawa to get the juice? Yeah, that just wouldn't end well. I saw this and I thought, oh, this is awesome. And as you mentioned earlier, it is definitely inspired by the Mines of Moria from Lord of the Rings. But, that is spectacular to look at, isn't it? Sometimes you go, if only I had a bigger television. Unbelievable. Bloody beautiful.
This is definitely a series you could watch at the cinema, and it would be more impressive than in your lounge room.
Yeah. It was just stunning, and I absolutely loved it. So there you go. And of course, just reiterating that Bo said, it was like the factional infighting that made them weak. And the problem is, right, that nothing's ever going to fix that. Okay. So even if Mandalorian culture came back, it doesn't fix the problems, right? You've still got all these different groups. All of them want to be in charge. There's no magic bullet that just fixes it all, right?
Yeah.
It just isn't going to happen. They're a warring sort of culture. They have their groups. They have their factions. And there's just because the culture was destroyed, if it was to be rebuilt, the same thing would happen all over again. Because as we learn from, even in real life, in our world, history always repeats itself, right? Because it's easy to say, oh, well, it happened yesterday. We won't repeat it. But if it happens 100 years from now, of course it will happen again because people didn't live through that. So I thought that was really interesting. So, but yeah, there's no hope for the Mandalorian culture. They've really screwed their own pooch, so to speak. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, the intrigue and the fighting and all of that did remind me of sort of Game of Thrones.
DJ's asked if I don't stream in 4K. I don't have a 4K television, so that's the reason. I'm good old standard HD for me. So very, very good. Yes, good stuff. And poor dad jokes. Oh yeah, staple of my vocabulary. Absolutely fantastic. Very, very cool. And just for those who didn't know, so there's more discussions about the Mandalorian culture. And it turns out, for those who didn't know, Bo-Katan's father was Adonai. I think Adonai. I can't pronounce the surname. Kreis or Kreese. I always get it wrong. But there's a lot of backstory there that we haven't actually seen yet, which is kind of cool. So, but the important thing is that when you want to go to the waters of Mandalore and all that, there's a plaque there. It was a tourist attraction. And I was wondering how many people who've got 3D printers are going to be making replicas of this plaque tomorrow. How good was that?
Well, I thought that's a very good way to prove to the armorer that he was there. He can take a picture on his phone and text her, "I'm back in."
I did like that. It became a tourist attraction. That is just very, very groovy. That's one thing I didn't expect, actually. So, yes, very, very cool. And another thing that we didn't know. So the logo, the Mandalorian logo is a mythos. Oh, geez, I can't even say it. Can you say it for me? Mythosaur skull. Thank you.
Mythosaur
And it's
skull.
mentioned there that she says from the plaque, it is from these legends that the score signet was adopted and became the symbol of our planet. So it's actually called the score signet, even though it's based on the Mythosaur skull. So it was good that was all finally worked out and canonized and put in stone. So I quite like that. It was good.
Yeah, I thought the whole thing was very interesting. I did think if that much of the city survived and it was that deep down, truly did everyone get killed in the planetary bombing?
I don't know. They're certainly implying that, and of course, a lot of the
Yeah,
Mandalorians lived off-world on Concordia and Concord Dawn and all that sort of places. So,
yeah.
yes, very very cool. I like it. Make the plaque and post it by the pool. Absolutely fantastic. So I did like it. Yes, it became a tourist thing. So it's interesting from his perspective. This is a
Yeah,
big religious sort of moment. It's like going to what do you call it? Mecca? Is that what they call it? Mecca, the place in Israel or whatever
yeah,
it's called?
yeah. Anywhere, I guess, but yeah, for
Yep,
Mecca,
yep,
for
yep. And from her perspective, it's like, mate, it's just a place with water in it. Completely different perspectives for exactly the same thing. I thought it was kind of cool. But the important thing is, Din is redeemed, right? He's taken a dip in the waters. How good is that? Take that armor, shove it up your funkin' waggles. He's redeemed. He's in the drink. It is all good. He's quoted his creed thing. Done and dusted.
Now,
What
I
do you
did
reckon,
wonder
dude?
how this works because last week we had the apostate, so it was to do with religion, and this was obviously like getting baptized again. But usually, when you get baptized, you don't go in the water with your helmet on and everything. And I did wonder if he would take everything off to go into the water, and he didn't.
He
So
started. I agree with you. He started stripping the gear off, and I go, "How far is this going to go?" I mean, she said you have to, was it you have to bathe like normally you bathe in the nude, right, or at least in your underwear.
yeah,
And I thought, oh, and I thought, had he taken the helmet off, that would have been awesome. Even though, ironically, he's actually, I'm sort of broken the rules, but I'm redeeming myself at the same time.
well, the
But
whole thing last week where you had the little boy and he didn't have the helmet on, and then after he went through the ceremony, it goes on again. I thought that was going to be the same. It was going to be like resetting, but no, he
yeah,
didn't even take the helmet off for that. So there you go.
yeah, I thought, and that would have been interesting. At least remove other armor parts. I thought that because that really is stripping away his self
Yeah.
assuredness and saying, "Well, okay, I'm prepared to leave myself really vulnerable for this moment because it's a bit of a big deal." So imagine he eventually goes back to the armor, and the armor says, "So did you strip down to into your wife runs before you went in?" He goes, "No." It's like, "All right, back you go, son."
Well, it's Disney, so they're probably not allowed to show his little mythosaur.
But it did. You're a freaking idiot. Speaking of which, I like this comment here. It's not a mythosaur anymore. It's a realosaur. That's exactly what it is. A realosaur, because it does exist. And I thought, did the armorer actually know that this thing was down there? Right? Or whether she just said, jump in the waters of the mines of Mandalore. It's all good, knowing fully well that this thing was buried underneath. Like it really is like Smorg to a large degree.
Yeah.
Waking the sleeping dragon. And did she know it was down there? I was just curious. It's just a compute, just pure speculation. So
I did think it was a really good piece of mythology. I mean, it's already built on stuff that was there in Star Wars, but the mythosaur wasn't really that well known until Mandalorian came along. I think you said it was mentioned in one book years ago or something.
yeah,
But a lot of shows that have mythology, Game of Thrones with dragons and things like that. They build on this, and whoever can ride or tame or kill the dragon is the true leader, and that's something we see over and over again. I really like that because it plays into George Lucas and Joseph Campbell, and like the myths
yeah,
being the same in every sort of story and ones that everyone can identify with. And I think that's a great thing to do in Star Wars because everyone gets it. You know,
yeah.
anyone who sees it, someone writing that coming out goes, yep, they're the leader, because that's something that's sort of built into all mythology.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There was a question I think we was asked when he fell off the edge. Did his armor make him sink, or was he pulled under? I don't think we really sort of know. And I like the fact that Bo's rockets can actually work underwater too, which is kind of handy. So, but it was a moment. He takes one last step, and it's a long drop. Anyway, okay. Rob said down to his budgie smugglers. Don't you mean his Grogu smugglers? There you go. just ignore the ears that are sticking out the side. Oh, goodness gracious me. Very good. All right, so there's only a couple of images left. I tell you what, Dean really is Captain Useless in this episode. 3 times he had to get rescued, but twice Bo did it, and once by Grogu. It's like, mate, you are absolutely unbelievable. One of the rare occasions of this entire series, like whether it be like second season, first season, where he didn't do anything. He just had all these things happen to him, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody's saying. Bo, you can clearly see, is thinking, hey, if I ride the mythosaur, which is once mythical, but now it's not, will she be able to reclaim Mandalore? And with even if she doesn't have the dark saber, and this is echoing of almost what's happened in the book of Boba Fett with Boba Fett and the Rancor.
Yeah.
And if anything, you could see in her mind, she's sitting there going, how am I going to get this thing out of the water? How am I going to get on it? And what's going to happen when I do that? And even Shane, good to see Shane joining us tonight, was thinking the same thing. So, yes. What do you think?
I think it could go either way. I think it's going to be one of those things where she's the one that really wants to do it, and it just falls into Din's lap, because we've seen that happen again and again and again.
Well, it would be almost like a kick in the teeth to Bo if it ended up that he ended up, as in Din ends up riding the mythosaur, and he's got the dark saber, and everybody goes, "Oh, all hail the Din, the reluctant leader." Yeah, you do wonder. So, but I liked it. You could see in her mind, she go, "Oh, that's the fix to all my problems. I ride the mythosaur, everything goes back to being normal, even though their entire planet's been bombed to the shies and hasn't." So,
it's going to be like the life of Brian, where he says, "I'm not the Messiah," and everyone goes, "Only the true Messiah would say that he's not the Messiah." It seems to just come back to him no matter what. I did think when the Mandalorian started, it was going to be the Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, where he would come in and then fix stuff and disappear and everyone would forget him. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to set him up when it gets to the end of the series that he's a major player in the Star Wars universe.
Seems that way. Absolutely. So, Christy, when you have a moment, can you give me your crimson yawns for the episode, please? Remember, the more yawns, the worse it was. The less yawns, the better it was. One of the things that happens with the good old Mandalorian is the Bad Batch animated series comes out on exactly the same day as this episode. So, The Mines of Mandalore came out, and on the same day, The Outpost came out with the Bad Batch. Now, for those who have not been watching Bad Batch, and that's probably a lot of people, the shows are becoming a lot more adult and a lot more dramatic in the past couple of weeks. And ironically, there are actually similarities between The Outpost and The Mines of Mandalore, which came out on the same day. So they did have parallels, as I said. So they both include caves. They both had booby traps. They both had blood. So blood in the Bad Batch is unbelievably rare. And they both had anti-hero rescues. And some fans still rated the Bad Batch episode, The Outpost, being just slightly better than what happened with the Mandalorian. But I thought that was just really interesting. So, because after last week, the Bad Batch episode absolutely romped it in terms of being a better episode than what the Apostate was. But this time it's a bit closer together. But I thought, well, there you go. So, dude,
I think as sci-fi fans, we're pretty lucky at the moment. We can watch Picard, which has been good. We can watch The Bad Batch, which people are enjoying. And The Mandalorian's taken an upturn this week. I would say this week, I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Very good stuff. And before I go into Christie's Crimson Yawns, just a reminder for those who are watching the show, if you want to know more about what's going on with Sci-Fi Zone, be sure to check out our socials and our the YouTube channel and the Twitches and Instagrams and all that other exciting stuff. And as Aaron mentioned yesterday, shameless plug earlier on. Don't forget to check out his store. Mr. Aaron, what do you got going on for Mandalorian stuff, dude?
What haven't we got going on? We've got Lego, we've got figures, we've got posters, we've got cards. Mandalorian, Grogu. And for those who get it in this way, Baby Yoda.
Oh, it's like swear words, isn't it? The cash cow. Absolutely love it. All right, so what did Christy have to think of the episode, The Mines of Mandalore? And we love Christy's thoughts and views because she's very, very honest with them. She has gone for the full 6 yawns, which is equivalent of 4 out of 10, which is a vast improvement over last week. So there you go. And as she said, mainly because of the amazing sets, and it was indeed. For myself, I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I could look past some of the bits that don't make sense, but I could see where they're going. And I really did like the fact that Bo and Din got to have a conversation, and it was a bit more in depth than what we've seen previously. It was a bit silly that Din constantly got himself into trouble and had to be rescued by everybody. But I enjoyed it. I found it entertaining, and I guess that's the key thing. So there's something for everyone, I think. And big step up. So I don't know, 7, 8 out of 10, whatever. Yep. So what do you reckon, dude?
Aren't we boring? We generally agree with each other on most things.
Well, yeah, and I think you'll find that because we both think the same way, probably a lot of people feel the same way as well. And, of course, part of our discussion is to get people to think about what they've seen. A lot of people watch a show and go, oh, my God, that's the greatest thing ever. But when you have a discussion, you can make people think, oh, hang on, I hadn't thought of that. Oh, maybe I do need to revisit that again, or have a bit of a think about that again, or question that again. Or they could just say, hey, they loved it, we loved it, and it was all good. But either way, it seems to be tracking quite nicely. And we don't know where it's going to be heading now, but all good fun. What do you reckon, Mr. Dude?
Yeah, fantastic. It's been an interesting to see the difference between the first episode and the second episode for sure. I'm much happier this week.
Yeah, it almost like last week's episode really was just. Someone actually did, a fan. I didn't want to put the quote up. Actually, called last week's episode. Actually, in the quote was this way. This episode was far better than last week's turd. That's actually a true quote. And I go, oh, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? It's like Jesus Christ. There you go. Take that if you don't mind, umpire. But yes, very good stuff. So we'll see how it all tracks out. The next episode's out in a couple of days. All good, all very exciting. Anyway, we're going to sign off now for our review. Anything you want to say before we go, Mr. Aaron?
No, just thanks everyone for joining us. There was a lot of interesting and cool comments today.
Very, very cool. All right, everybody, party hard, rock on. Get ready for episode 3, and we will be back next Monday to talk about it once again. Otherwise, party hard, rock on, and may all your Grogu's be with you. Don't say Baby Yoda. That's swear words. All right, catch you guys.
Good night.